Welcome to a PSL Demo Day. Today, we have with us Daan Steenkamp, who's CEO and founder of Codera. They're a startup in South Africa looking to make data more accessible and useful for policymakers, researchers, and those in business. Daan, great to have you with us.
Great. Thanks so much, Jason. Thank you for the opportunity to present. So I'll just start by giving you a bit of a summary of what our platform EconData is, and then I'll do a demonstration in terms of how you can use it. I'll start by just sharing some slides. Great. Jason, would you just confirm that you can see these?
Yep, looks great. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, so I hope to convince you today that if you use our platform EconData, which makes South African public domain data available for research and analysis, that you'll become, if you're an analyst, a super analyst, if you're a researcher, a super researcher, and it'll help you to 3x your productivity. Because what EconData does is it enables you to automate any of your workflows that use public domain data, whether you use Excel or whether you code in R or Python. What EconData does is makes it possible for you to access a large quantum of South African public domain data in an easy way, so that you can keep any research that you've developed up to date by just rerunning your scripts, or automate any other analysis that you have done. So I'm going to quickly talk about what EconData is. So EconData is a public platform where we make public domain data freely available for non-commercial use, for use by researchers or by students or members of the public. And Codera, we as Codera run the platform, and we see ourselves as being part of the movement to democratize data in South Africa. And as a result, we are working to add more and more public domain data to the platform to enable users to automate any analysis that requires public domain data. As I'll show you shortly, there are a couple of things about EconData that distinguishes it from other public data platforms like Fred or DBnomics. And that's that we make real-time vintages of data available. And anyone that does forecasts knows that that's really important if you want to build models if you want to use models for forecasting and evaluate how different models would perform if you only have real-time data available. So data as available at a specific point in time. So what EconData does is it really enables you to do sophisticated analysis of the performance of different types of models, but also look at things like the forecasts from official sources like Statistics South Africa, the Reserve Bank, or the National Treasury in the South African context. So you can evaluate real-time forecasts and compare them to those from models. So I'll do a quick demonstration shortly, but I would invite you to go and sign up for a free account at econdata.co.za and to go and try the platform. I'll just quickly emphasize a couple of key things about EconData. So the reason we developed EconData is that we needed to be able to bring together data from lots of different sources. And we found that a lot of data in South Africa, like in other jurisdictions, just isn't available in an easily consumable form. So data is often not published in machine-readable format, or data providers don't make data available using APIs. And so what we have done is developed an API and EconData's platform to enable users to get access to public domain data that should be easily accessible, but for practical reasons may not be. So EconData is a centralized place for users to go and get South African macroeconomic, financial and banking data. This helps democratize data access, so making data discoverable, and meaning that we as a community don't have to replicate the same work over and over, because we needed to have this platform available for the work that we do, and we felt that this would help serve the community and make it possible for others to build on top of the infrastructure that we have developed. So EconData makes it easy for you as a user to find data that's in the public domain. We provide an extensive user guide that provides a summary of the available data. We provide lots of detail about the metadata of the data, so data that describe the data that we store. And in many cases, we've gone to a great deal of effort to develop metadata where there may not be good metadata available, and I'll show you what that looks like. But the intention is that whether you are a data scientist with lots of experience or someone who would like to learn how to apply the tools from data science in the economic or financial context, you can go to the website, easily access data, download it into Excel, but also learn how to use R or Python if you wish to code. We, as I said, make the data available in Excel, and you can update any data that you've downloaded using our add-in, and you can use our R and Python packages to access data programmatically from the platform as well. We also provide a lot of resources to help teach students how to code and how to automate their workflows. So we have, I'll show you shortly on the platform, a lot of code samples that show you how to automate models, how to visualize data, and how to do things like produce reports using LaTeX or Markdown. And these are the kinds of tools that, as a researcher, you would use if you are working in an academic context. And so for students that are moving to postgraduate level, these are important skills that you need, both as a researcher or as a graduate student, but also these are skills that will prepare you for work that you'll be doing in industry if you move to industry after studying. So we see EconData as a community platform, and we encourage people to get into contact with us if they are working with South African data and producing research. Just before I do the demo, I also just wanted to mention that the reason EconData is important is that if you want to keep research up to date, if you want to automate workflows that use public domain data, you need a platform like EconData. And so what I'm showing you on screen is our SA Nowcast. So it is a fully automated weekly nowcast of GDP and unemployment that you can access from our website, and I'll show you shortly. And it was built in collaboration with academics and as a demonstration of the kinds of things that you can do when you leverage public domain data at scale and modern modeling techniques. And so it's an example of the kind of interactive, live analytics that you can generate from models once if you know how to code and develop models. So it is a demonstration of the kinds of data products that you can build on top of our data platform. So I'm going to just quickly go back to the platform and then I'll show you how you can use it. So again, it's econdata.co.za. As I said, it is a source of public domain data, which we make available to researchers for free. Because this is not funded, we, as a company, follow a freemium approach. So we charge commercial users to access the platform for commercial purposes, but we make it freely available to students and researchers. So what you would do is you click on the app section. You would start by registering. If you haven't registered already, you'll see I've already registered, so I'm just going to be signing in. And then before I show you how to use the platform, everything I'm going to show you here, you can get videos and content in our user guide to remind you if you get stuck. So if you get stuck on how to register, or if you get stuck on how to use the platform, you can go to the user guide. But I'm going to just kick straight into it and show you how to use the platform. So at a high level, the platform shows you data by data category and by data provider. So we have most of the public domain data that's available from official sources and regularly updated. So Statistics South Africa is South Africa's main data provider, and we have most of the releases that are regularly updated. We've done this because we focus on producing forecasts, but over time we hope to also add more complete data sets that are updated less frequently. We also have extensive data from the South African Reserve Bank, which I'll show shortly, as well as data that, as far as we know, is not publicly available in a easily consumable form from any other source. So we have budget reviews from the National Treasury that provide detailed information of national budget allocations and budget projections. And then we also have extensive data describing developments in the banking industry from the BA regulatory forms published by the Reserve Bank. These provide income statement and balance sheet information, which is incredibly important to understand developments in the banking industry. I'm just going to start by showing you, for example, Statistics South African data and how easily you can access data. Any users that have used South African data before will know that lots of the data in South Africa is published in snapshot form. So it's often not available as time series that you can download for the whole period that you're interested in. And so what Codera has done with EconData is make it possible for you to access data in easy to use forms. We have also created a lot of our own databases that are very valuable for research. And I'll show you a couple of examples. Just under prices, for example, it's worth highlighting have detailed COICOP breakdowns of consumer prices. So this is down to level of individual goods like brown bread, or bread, I should say. And we've developed detailed data sets like these, historical CPI weight data sets that go back to 1970. Again, as far as we know, this is the only source of this kind of data for South Africa. We also have analytical series for consumer prices and things like RPPI, which is residential property prices in South Africa. And as far as we know, we're also the only source for that data in an easy consumable form. So just to give you an example of how to use the platform, you can see you can select under the data set you're interested in. As I said before, because researchers might be interested in methodological questions like revisions to data concepts or rebasing of information, of data concepts, what we do is we provide historical versions of the data as published. And then for the most recent release, we stitch data together. What this does is that as a methodologist, you can then look at how conceptual changes have affected the analytical series that have been produced by official producers of statistics. You can also roll back to each release, so you can look at the data that was published at each point in time. For CPI, which is not revised in South Africa, this doesn't really make a big difference. But for things like GDP, where the data is revised, this is really important because the availability of individual releases means that you can construct your own true real-time data sets with which to train models or evaluate forecast errors. So just to show you show you how easy the platform is to use, you can search for a concept that you're interested in this case, headline CPI. There are lots of other options that you can use, but those are described in our methodological notes under the tutorial section in more detail. In the meantime, I'm just going to show you how to use the platform in a simple way. So here I'm showing you the index for CPI. You can immediately look at the series by plotting it. You can also look at metadata that describe the concept that you're looking at and gives it a mnemonic that you can use to programmatically access the data. You can export the series that you've selected in a variety of different formats. So for example, you can export it to Excel, and I'll show you, then it'll pop up, and I'll show you how you can then keep whatever you've downloaded up to date in future. But it also provides you with a little code snippet that you can then use if you want to programmatically download that data using R. And it provides a citation for you to use if you were going to use that data. It's worth probably showing you one or two more examples. I'll just show you one or two others from the Reserve Bank, because what we've done is we've made it possible to access data from different releases and different publications. So for example, GDP data, you can get from Statistics South Africa, or you can get it from several releases from the Reserve Bank. So for example, you can get the full quarterly bulletin that includes GDP data from EconData. And this is a really massive data set. It's over 4,500 concepts. Well, it's around 4,500 concepts, which is updated quarterly. We also have bespoke data sets that only Codera has access to because we've constructed this historical database. So for example, we have historical MPC forecasts. So all the assumptions and the projections that the Reserve Bank releases as part of its Monetary Policy Committee process. And we have extensive data from the National Treasury that describe concepts, public finance concepts, and importantly, all of the historical vintages. So what that enables you to do, I'll show you quickly. I'll just go to our tutorial page and show you some of the analysis that you can do with that kind of data. So you can, for example, produce sophisticated analysis of developments in public finance very, very quickly. And we provide code snippets to reproduce the charts in the tutorial section. So this shows you that within a couple of lines of code, you can produce a chart that describes the composition of debt in South Africa over time. And likewise, you can produce hairy line charts that describe historical forecasts from the National Treasury over time. Again, as an example, we provide a code snippet that shows you that type of analysis takes about 12 lines of code. And this is another example, I think that's worth pointing out. If you were going to stitch this together by hand as a researcher to describe allocations to provinces in South Africa, this would take you a tremendous amount of time if you had to go to each of the individual PDF documents or Excel documents that describe individual year allocations. And what we have done as Codera is made it possible to have a centralized source where you can programmatically keep these kinds of charts updated. So if you do any public finance research in South Africa, now you can rerun your scripts when you budget reviews are published and update your content for research papers. I'll just quickly go back and show you the other functionality on the platform. So there's a user guide. Just go and show you what that looks like. The user guide has a detailed summary of available data. If you click on that, it shows you in detail what the releases are that are available. I'll go to a particularly complex one just to show you the level of content, the level of the metadata that we have described. So I'll go to price indices. You can click on any component on any of these drop-down menus and see, get the mnemonics for the series that you would like to use. But you can also look at, for example, our CPI weights. The data set which we've developed goes into tremendous detail about the historical structure of the data, and provides you with information on how to use that data. If you were, for example, wanting to do research into alternative measures of aggregates of consumer prices. So we provide tremendous metadata that makes it possible for you as a researcher to understand the data sets and to produce your own scripts that use that data. We provide.
So Daan, are you saying there that you can go back and reconstruct your own CPI, like change the basket weights and
So let me show you some content.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
So we have, for example, so in our tutorial section, we show several examples. In this case, by way of example, how you can analyze historical weights. So here, for example, we show a comparison of the weights from the 1970 release to the 2019 release. And you can, this is just at high division level. So this is just an aggregation to about 12 components. But you can see how the weights have changed. And so you have, with our CPI weights data set, you can then construct your own measures of consumer prices. This is important because the Statistics South Africa periodically reweights consumer prices as they use updated survey information to assess how consumer expenditure behavior has changed. And so there's one of these coming up at the end of the year. And so as far as we know, this is the only source of historical weights. So if you want to actually do sophisticated methodological research to understand how the change in the weights will affect the picture about aggregate consumer prices, you would need to do this either manually or use EconData. So it enables methodological research that is otherwise very difficult to do. One of our interns constructed this data set and had to pour through hundreds of pages of or dozens of pages of very poorly photocopied historical documents in order to manually transcribe these weights. So we provide this as a public service because we believe this kind of methodological work is very important. So if you go to our blog page, we produce regular blog posts that describe the kinds of things that you can do with South African public domain data. And so we have a whole work program just on CPI weights, and we are working to create alternative CPI series to compare to the official ones. So I hope that's a very detailed answer to your question.
That's great. Yeah, amazing.
So if you're interested in learning how to code, you can go to our tutorial section and look at specific examples. I'd like to point one or two out to you while we're at it. So for example, we provide code snippets and videos for how to automate models. In this case, I just wanted to show you that with about 20 lines of code, you can produce fairly sophisticated forecast analysis. You can produce a density forecast for CPI and keep that model up to date by rerunning the script every time new data comes up. And we take you through line by line how to set up scripts like that. We also we have, as I say, we have, if it gets stuck, we have lots of information on how to use the platform, how to use the add-in, we provide background information on lots of different topics. We have an EconData blog, which provides content on how to do things programmatically, how to learn how to code, for example. We provide not just information on using R, but also all sorts of other related technologies that help you be a better researcher or analyst. So how to, for example, use Markdown or LaTeX, how to use Git, which is an important tool for any data scientist to know how to use. And I'll just go back quickly. And if anyone has questions about or gets stuck, you can contact us at econdata@codera.co.za. If you would give me a couple more minutes, I'd like to quickly show you just that you can use everything in Excel as well. I'll just open this up. So this is what the data looks like that you've downloaded. To get access to the EconData add-in, you just go to Get Add-ins. You type in EconData, you spell it right, EconData, and then you add it. So it's as easy as that. You can see I've added it twice already. But the important thing is once you've signed in, and I'll just sign in quickly. I can remember my password. Then you will have the identical functionality that you have on the web, you have in Excel. So this means that you don't have to be a programmer to use EconData. You can just make chart packs in Excel and just click refresh as the data comes out. We try our best to keep the data updated within minutes of releases. So we generally are actually faster than commercial providers of data because of the programmatic way that we do things. Which means that as a user, you can use Excel, or as I've shown you here, you can use R or Python to run models that use South African data. I'd like to just show you one final example. So just to show you that, that this stuff is live. We want to demonstrate the kinds of things that you can actually do if you follow the way of work that we describe on EconData. You are able to build data products, models, or do research that you can keep up to date. You can use sophisticated methodologies like this one to do nowcasts that help you understand what the implications of data outturns are for nowcasts. So what this does, it tells you how recent data releases have affected the nowcast. So if retail numbers have come out recently, it shows you how important that release was relative to other recent releases. And you can see here are the most recent nowcasts for Q3 in South Africa, for the Q3 GDP publication. So you can access this for free on our website, and you can see other demos of the kinds of things that we build using EconData. I'd also like to encourage anyone who's interested in going and looking at following our blog, you can sign up if you use an RSS feed aggregator, or whether you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter, or you can add us on LinkedIn or Twitter. So because we produce 2 of these plots, let me go back, 2 blog posts a day. Today we did 3 or 4 actually. And so a lot of, we try and promote the use of South African data for public policy analysis. And we demonstrate the kinds of insights that you can get from public domain data. So just going back to my presentation, what I would like to invite you to do is to join our community. Please sign up to EconData. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear feedback about your experience using it. We are continuously adding more data. So at the moment, we're working on adding provincial budget data, and that's millions of rows of individual line items. So that will enable detailed provincial public finance analysis. And once we're done with that, the plan is to do the same for at municipal level. So we are constructing large data sets that have not really been utilized for research to their full extent. And so we'd encourage researchers and students to use the data that we make available, to get in touch and work with us. We would like to add more data to the platform over time. We'd like to collaborate on projects that use public domain data. So thanks for the opportunity to present, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
This was so great to hear about your work at Codera. Now, I'm a little bit wondering, like, some of these data that are in PDFs or in Excel files, and I know just dealing with, in my context, US government data, where they're changing the format of the spreadsheet from one release to the next, it's hard to keep up with. What are some tools you're using to manage that and not make it too labor intensive to keep these data updated?
So the underlying approach that we are using, so the data information model that underlies EconData is known as SDMX. So this is the same data information model used by Eurostat and promoted by the large multilateral institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, etc., which means that the approach that we use to ingest data is more complicated than other ways of doing things, but it bakes in the metadata associated with the data. We go to great lengths to make sure that the data, that we validate the data, make sure that it's conceptually consistent across releases. As I've shown you, we work very hard to maintain the definitions of the data as published and the structure of the data as published over time, which means that researchers can come back and construct historical alternatives of the data concepts and stitch things together themselves. And importantly, by following this way of managing the data, it means that not only can we consume very easily data from data providers that use an SDMX way of sharing data, but it also means that everything that we have can be shared back very programmatically in a way that bakes in best practice data governance, metadata management, etc. So that's part of it. So we work hard to make sure that we govern the data in as best a way as possible, in line with best practice. And we use a variety of different tools to scrape data from data providers, depending on the way that the data is structured. So as you've said, some data is easier to use than others. lots of data is in individual, say, monthly spreadsheets. And what we then do is we have scripts that compile the data, structure the data according to the data schema that we've created. And what we then do is we have a monthly validation process each time a release is made available. Because of the programmatic way we do things, we can generally ingest large new releases within minutes, validate the data, and have it out within minutes. So we often beat, as I said, the large data providers, the large international data providers, because we are able to consume things programmatically, check them programmatically, validate them, even though we're a very small team. So again, this isn't that Codera, it isn't simply that Codera is awesome, it is that we stand on the shoulders of giants because we use open source technologies and we build using open source tools. We're able to leverage the work that is happening in other areas. So, and that's why I'm trying to encourage others that also work with open source tools and are doing similar things to get in touch with us, because by working together, we can actually achieve a lot more. And we have, as I've said, we have collaborated with members of academia to develop models and keep them alive. And we'd love to do more of that. I hope that answered your question.
It did, and I didn't even appreciate kind of the model that's going on in the background to ensure this data consistency. So that's super helpful to know about, and seems very powerful in making sure you are, as you digest these data, putting them in the correct format. You have this check that everything is consistent. It's really amazing. Now this all seems like a lot of work done, and you're giving. I've just, as we've been talking, signed up for my account and gone through browse these data. You're giving so much away for free. How can you talk a little bit about the business model and how you anticipate being able to provide these services in the long run?
So because we believe very deeply in open source and in open data, we felt that it is important to have as much public domain data publicly available as possible. Now, what we do is you'll see that some data sets are subscriber only, but what we do is we make them available on a case-by-case basis to researchers. So we hoped initially to have the whole platform completely open, but the reality is we have substantial maintenance costs to keep this going. So we have decided to follow the freemium model as a result. Now, we hope to make it possible in the future to make more and more data publicly available for free to anyone. And so we focus our commercial activities on the kinds of things that we show in our research section and on our blogs. So we build models for clients that require public domain data. We develop indicators for clients where they have large proprietary data sets. And more importantly, EconData is a platform for data products. So we do proprietary implementations of EconData to make it possible for clients to automate any of their workflows where they need to mix their own data with public domain data. So that's how we do this. But we think it's really important for there to be a platform that makes data available to the public, that enables things to be automated and data products to be built on it. So when I say data products, I mean models, to enable it to be one to keep research alive, not just produce a research paper once, but instead make it possible for researchers to continue to demonstrate what the implications of their models are as the new data becomes available, so we can actually realize what evidence-based policy means. Richard, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, Daan, that is such an amazing demonstration. We met you about a month ago in South Africa, and this is still a lot more than I even realized you were doing. So I've got a million questions. I'll try to boil it down to just a few. One thing that stands out is Jason and I have been involved with groups like QuantEcon, who spend a lot of time making open source training materials available. I think our work in particular is on making open source modeling materials available. Your work on data, I just think if you think about those three areas, training, modeling, and data, your work on data is quite amazing. I wish, when I think about data sets that are hard to use in the United States, like the Consumer Expenditure Survey, PSID, panel surveys, income dynamics, it would be so nice to have something like this in the United States. It feels like you're doing a lot of the work for South African government organizations. Are you, okay, so that's a bunch of setup for my two questions. One, are you seeing your work influence how South African government data providers, how cleanly they provide the data, and are you seeing them move more towards your model of quality and interaction and APIs? My guess is the answer there is not much. Two, have you seen any ability to get funding from the South African government to actually help pay your compute and data storage and data updating costs? And then three, if your freemium model is covering your costs to do this, man, why don't we just copy this in every kind of mid-level African country and every country? So I'll stop talking.
So while you were talking, I was trying to find some examples, but I can share them with you later. But to answer your question, the challenge in any emerging market is that government's funding is always constrained. So in my opinion, this isn't going to be something that that necessarily is going to be possible without the private and the public sector working together. I'd like to emphasize that what I've shown you is the work of only a small handful of people. We're talking about less than 10 people. So I think it is really important that as a community, we demonstrate that this kind of thing is actually possible. It's possible for almost no money, so so we can solve a lot of the data accessibility problems in emerging markets feasibly, even with the kinds of budget constraints that governments have. But it is, unfortunately, we're not an NGO, we're a private company. And so I think the difficulty is in developing frameworks for public-private partnerships for data the way that we do them for infrastructure. And I think that's something that we're not used to in the community, but it's something there are examples of this in other jurisdictions. And I think that's really the way that you leverage the innovation that you can get from having people in academia, in the private sector, and people in the public sector working together. But for that, we need new funding approaches that actually promote this kind of way of work. We found personally that it is very difficult to get funding for this kind of thing. And so we eventually just decided we were going to do it without funding because we couldn't get any. And because we needed to do this ourselves for the commercial products that we're trying to build, we needed EconData to exist. And so we'd like to keep EconData in the public domain. But it is very difficult to manage data to a high degree of statistical quality, particularly when you start getting into data that's more difficult to use. What I was going to try and show you is some summaries that we've done where we've benchmarked South Africa's public domain data to other countries. The key takeaway is basically that South Africa lags significantly when it comes to things like data availability in machine readable format. So that's one of the key things that we're trying to petition the public sector to make data available in a more easy to ingest form, but also for us to have public entities that have a mandate to make data available to work with the private sector if they don't have the capabilities to make the data available. Our key challenge in South Africa is that lots of public institutions that have a mandate to make data available don't do it. And so it is important for us as a community to work together to unearth the data that is available, because it's in the private sector's interest to have public domain data available, because it's very hard to understand what's going on in the economy, to make business decisions without data to benchmark against. And so that is our plea. But we also, I don't think, we realize that this is so important that we didn't want to just wait for others. We felt that we needed to do it ourselves. So we didn't invite anyone that wants to work with us to get in touch, because I think, we've demonstrated this in a South African context, but we are working to do the same thing firstly with African data, and then hopefully later with international data as well.
Well, Daan, that's a really inspiring story. A great note to end on. Thank you so much for sharing you and your team's work. I encourage everybody who's watching this to take a look at what Codera offers, sign up for those data, and find any way you can to support this. It's great. Daan, thanks so much.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.